And those are the exact places that Pyrex often put his 808s, and every single pattern that he does is a variation of this one. And now is the time for me to show you how you can make the iconic rolls that Pyrex Whippa does on every single beat that he makes. What's up guys, I'm KUSS and today I will be showing you how you can make beats just like Pyrex. I will be breaking this tutorial down in some steps. I will be talking about where you can get the exact sounds that Pyrex Whippa uses on all of his beats, his formula to 808s, his formula to 808 rolls, his formula to hi-hats, open hats, and some mixing techniques for you to have your 808s to hit as hard as his. And without further ado, let's get into this tutorial. So let's start out with where you can get the exact sounds that Pyrex Whippa uses on all of his beats. For that, I will be leaving down there on the description the link to 2 drum kits, one that I made by myself, just compiling a bunch of sounds that I found that were very close, if not the exact ones that Pyrex Whippa often uses on his beats, and the other one is a Pyrex Whippa drum kit that Lunch77 made. So for you that don't know who Lunch77 is, he is a Reddit user that often posts very complete drum kits from mainstream producers like Murda, Metro, Wheezy, Southside, and his Pyrex Whippa drum kit is very good and very complete. So make sure you guys go check both download links on the description. But one disclaimer before we get into his formulas on his open hats, 808s, hi-hats, and 808 rolls is that I uploaded the Pyrex Whippa drum kit by myself because the link on his page wasn't working, but I'll be leaving down there on the description his socials so you guys can show Lunch77 some love. And that's pretty much it for the sound selections. So now for his formula once it comes to rim shots and open hats. So let's start out with his rim shots. They are very basic. He just tends to put them exactly on the places that most producers would use claps and snares. But once it comes to open hats, it is very interesting. You will never see Pyrex Whippa using places on the open hats where the metronome doesn't hit. So if you didn't really understand what I'm trying to say, if you just grab the step sequencer here and play the metronome on like 100 BPM, you will see that the metronome will always hit on like the first rectangle out of the gray ones and the red ones. Sorry for the open hat playing on the background, I forgot to just take it out, but you could see that the metronome will always hit on the first like rectangle out of the gray ones and the red ones, and those are the exact places that Pyrex will always put his open hats. You will never see Pyrex Whippa doing patterns like this, but you will always see Pyrex making his patterns like this. So if you didn't really understand, I'm gonna show you some examples. So the first one is a song that he produced from Young Mall called Don't Even Matter. The second one is Powerpuff from Southside, and the third one is Costa Rica by Dreamville. Let me just play them with the like metronome behind it so you can hear where exactly the open hat hits.
Hundreds on hundreds, it don't even matter. Sipping this codeine, fucked up my bladder. I was on Front Street, now they see me on channel. All this shit get cooked up, keep it right. It's somewhere. Yeah, nigga smoke that. Mellow, what's up, nigga? Pyrex Whippa, Pyrex.
And that's pretty much it once it comes to his open hats and rim shots. I know that Pyrex tends to use reversed open hats too, and he tends to put them exactly where the metronome hits. If you just grab Pony for an example, you will see that the reversed open hat is placed on like here on a place that the metronome hits, so it doesn't change if you are using open hats, normal open hats, or reversed ones. And as I said, that's pretty much it for the open hats and rim shots. So now for his formula once it comes to 808s. So those are the exact places that Pyrex often put his 808s, and every single pattern that he does is a variation of this pattern here. And Pyrex can get away with adding that many hits because he tends to use a shorter sample of the spins and slower BPMs ranging between 115 to 128. But if you reverse engineer him like to like Southside, that didn't really make sense, but if you just grab Southside for an example, you will see that because Southside tends to use longer samples of these spins and BPMs ranging between 150 to 170, you will see that the most common places that Southside would often put his 808s would be here, here, and here. And on the maximum, you will see Southside doing like this. But because, as I said, Pyrex tends to use a shorter sample of these spins and slower BPMs, he can use more 808 hits on his patterns. And some examples that I can show you, I have here like 20 patterns that he did, and I will show you 3 ones that really show perfectly what I'm trying to say. And it would be this first one, where the first pattern happens perfectly, but on the second half he added a variation, my bad, he added a variation on his pattern, adding like rows at the end and more hits here. On the second pattern, he just didn't use those hits here, and on the third example, he just used those hits here and just took the last hit off. So once you are trying to make a Pyrex Whippa type beat, make sure you copy this pattern here and add variations of your own to this pattern. Just taking off some hits or adding some hits or adding rows will be very good, and doing that you will have a very good and bouncy pattern, just like Pyrex always has on his patterns. So now for his formula once it comes to 808 rows. So now is the time for me to show you how you can make the rows that Pyrex does on every single beat that he makes. So if you don't know how the rows that Pyrex does sound like, this is a very good example. So it sounds very good, and I will show you now how you can do exactly that row and how you can consistently make rows just like that. So I thought about a bunch of ways of explaining this, and the easiest way that I could think of explaining this would be to compare the formation of the rows that he does to jokes. So just like jokes, you will have a setup and a punchline, but on the rows that Pyrex does, the punchline will always be a triplet. So the triplet is this row here that you can see at the end of the pattern, that you can do like just grabbing the 1/3, just pressing Shift D, putting until here, and pressing Ctrl B 3 times. So basically a triplet would be 3 notes on just one little bar right here, and the punchline will always be your triplet, and just like punchlines, the triplet will always stay at the end. So now that you know that the punchline will always be at the end and that will always be a triplet, how can you have a very good setup for you to have a very good row overall? Simple. You need to have the setup making sense with the punchline, just like jokes. And for you to achieve that, you need to use grids like the 1/3, because the 1/3 has a measurement to it that allow you to make rows that are very similar to the triplet. It is very easy to achieve a very good setup, and this is the grid that Pyrex always uses on all of the rows that he does. Those are 3 very good examples, my bad. And his favorite rows out of the 1/3 would be this row here that you can see happening here and here, that you can just press Shift D and do like just stretch it a little, 1 notch more, and just press Ctrl B 6 times. And his other favorite row would be this row here that you can see happening here, that is basically a triplet, but it's like a stretched triplet. And those 2 rows out of the 1/3 are very good, and I really recommend you guys using it, especially this one, because it is very good. So now that I showed you all of the theory behind it, let me show you how Pyrex made this row here from this beat that he produced, and how you can even improve this row. So this is how that row sounds like. Let me just play this part again. And you can easily do that by making this pattern here. And this pattern has a triplet on the punchline, as you can see. And as a setup for that, he used the stretched triplet row that you can just grab the triplet and stretch it to here. But that's one thing that only Pyrex does. On the last hit of this row, he just did this and this. And if you don't really trust me that this is the exact row that Pyrex did, one thing that you can do with rows that you like from a beat is that just discover the BPM of this. This was 128, and then just put it to 30 BPM. Not too low, but like 70 BPM is already very good. And compare the hits to your 808. So if you just compare to where the 808 hits to my pattern, it sounds like this. And this is why this is the exact row that Pyrex did on this beat. So actually two tips for you to improve this row is that for you to put your punchline, instead of just making it on the same pitch, just put it one octave up. This is something that Pyrex does on most of his rows. On most of the rows that he makes, all like the punchlines will always be pitched up. And one thing that he does is that for his hi-hats to make sense with this row, he does a triplet at the end most of the time, because if it just kept like the two-step pattern playing, it wouldn't sound that good. So because it's not on the same grid, because the triplets are playing like off grid and then the two-step is playing on grid, and it will sound like this. It won't sound as good as if you do like triplets with the hi-hats too, so you make the measurements on the 808s and hi-hats the same. And that's pretty much it for the tips for you to improve your own rows and your own patterns once you are applying them. So now for his formula once it comes to hi-hats. So I studied a bunch of hi-hat patterns that Pyrex Whippa did, and I found one place where he puts rows consistently. Like out of 10 beats that he would make, he would use this place 7 times at least, and that would be on the third hit of his patterns. That would be here, and you can see that happening here, 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 and here. And he tends to do that a lot because once he doesn't really have an idea of how he should make his patterns, he tends to put a row on the third hit, so that serves as a foundation for his next ideas. And it's like once you're trying to make a melody and you use a scale before you start making the and pressing the notes. That serves as a foundation for your ideas if you don't have anything in mind already. And Pyrex uses the third hit just like someone would use a scale on his melodies. I hope that made sense. I tried to explain it as best as I could. And now once it comes to his favorite rows, but there is one more thing that Pyrex does consistently on his beats that I have never seen other producer do, and that would be to switch between grids in just one hi-hat pattern. And a very good example of this would be this song that Pyrex Whippa produced for Wire and Merc, and that sounds like this.
Drop top, pull up, right wrist, cook up, left wrist, froze up, Glock 40, hold up, codeine in my soda, cookie bag, you smell the odor, 223 inside my coupe like Duke, all my players gon' shoot my.
And if you try to remake this pattern, which is very good, you will see that it has a bunch of rows. And if you try to make the first row out of this pattern using the 1/3, you can make it. But if you try to make the second row out of this pattern with the 1/3, you just can't make it. The shortest row of the 1/3 goes to here. So if you try to grab the 1/6, press Shift D, you can't make it again. You know, it's not the same measurement, it's not the same length of the note. But if you try to use the 1/4, you can make it exactly like this. But if you try to do this row using the 1/4, you just can't do it. You know, it's not on the same measurement. But if you get the 1/3, this is when you can finally do this row right here. So, and that is something that only Pyrex does, and I have only seen Pyrex Whippa doing this, and this is a very good technique if you want to have more rows for you to implement on on just one hi-hat patterns. And out of those two grids, his most favorite rows and his favorite rows would be those here. And switching between two type of grids is something that I have only seen Pyrex Whippa doing, and it is very good if you're trying to have more rows at your disposal, so you can add more variations to your own patterns. And out of those two grids, his most used rows would be those here. Those are ranked to his most favorite and to his least favorite. And his most used and favorite row would be the shortest row that you can only do using D1/4. And you can hear this row being used on How to Rob, on Trick or Treat by Young Dolph, and on Costa Rica by Dreamville. Now for his second most favorite row, that would be this long row using D1/3, and you can hear that row being used on Pony from the Baby and a lot of other rows, where he often uses this row here as a transition a lot. And those other two rows here, you can hear him using mostly on his lives, but not on songs that and on beats that he got placed, you know. And that's pretty much it once it comes to his hi-hat formula. And now for the mixing technique for your 808s to hit as hard as his. So it is very basic. You just need to go to Options, General Settings, and press this knob here. It will enable the legacy effects, and out of all of those, you just change this one here. Changing this one is very good because it adds a punch to your 808 if you just hear it. And it makes the mixing of your 808s way easier because it will make your 808s to hit very hard without you needing to turn it up a lot and clipping your 808s. So it helps a lot your mixing, and you can hear Pyrex using this on Spin's 808s and even on Zay 808s. So make sure once you're doing Pyrex type beats or even your beats, just implement this technique so the mixing of your 808s will be way easier and it will sound way harder. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you could learn something from this tutorial, and if you did, make sure you leave a like and leave down in the comments some ideas for next videos or some feedback so I can keep improving on my own tutorials. And if you didn't really understand something that I said throughout the tutorial, make sure you just DM me on my Instagram, and all of my socials will be either on the comments or on the description, so make sure you check those out. And thank you so much for watching again, and I hope to see you on the next tutorial.